You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, the government's grand plan for reducing emissions from planes, trains and automobiles is published. Find out what the future looks like for how we get around. A warning: the Amazon rainforest could be starting to emit more carbon dioxide than it absorbs. And kicking off a summer of sustainability on Sky Sports. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and meet those coming up with the solutions. And the government says it's the world's first green print, an ambitious plan to decarbonise all forms of domestic transport by 2050. The critics argue the proposals are unrealistic, underfunded, and the technology to meet the targets doesn't exist yet. Today, the UK's Transport Decarbonisation Plan was published. Our climate correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, has all the details on what it will mean for how we move around.
Green energy, it's our future. Yeah, we can't rely on coal anymore or diesels.
Thomas has been driving trucks for a decade. He knows that transport is the UK's largest contributor to emissions and agrees that needs to change. But as part of its drive to decarbonise the sector, the government has announced there'll be no new diesel HGVs sold after 2040. A big change at an uncertain time. The plan has left an industry still grappling with hydrogen and electricity as alternatives, feeling adrift.
This proposal is unrealistic. Alternative HGVs don't yet exist. We don't know when they'll exist, and we don't know how much they'll cost. And it's not clear what any transition will look like.
Trucking isn't the only industry affected by new targets.
The Department for Transport is also pledging to get domestic aviation carbon emissions down to net zero by 2040. That's 10 years earlier than previously promised. But the decarbonisation of our world isn't straightforward. And when it comes to planes, for example, the technology used to make them greener is still very much in development, and it's expensive.
In fact, money seems to be the key issue here. The government criticised for producing policy without a plan yet to help pay for it.
Unless we see action now from the Treasury and from Rishi Sunak, the Decarbonising Transport Plan and any plan on climate that comes over the coming weeks won't deliver what it needs to.
That may be true, but this roadmap contains a series of big gambles that the markets, consumers, technology and the government's own purse string holders will all deliver as we march towards net zero. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News, Heathrow.
In today's other climate news, NASA has warned the moon's wobbly orbit around Earth could impact global coastlines. Because the moon's gravity pulls the ocean's tides towards it, this wobble, set to start by 2035, will cause higher tides and higher sea levels. Combined with rising sea levels caused by climate change, some countries will see a dramatic increase in flooding. The European Union has unveiled new laws to help meet its target to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 55% before the end of the decade. A dozen major proposals include phasing out the sale of petrol cars and plans to tax the carbon emissions generated by goods imported from foreign countries. It's now down to the 27 member countries and EU Parliament to agree to the proposals. And Singapore has built one of the world's largest floating solar panel farms. Spanning an area the size of 45 football fields, the panels will produce enough electricity to power the island's 5 water treatment plants. The solar farm will reduce carbon emissions by about 32,000 tonnes every year, the equivalent to 7,000 cars being taken off the roads. Now, here on our data dashboard, you can see the total amount of carbon dioxide the world has produced in million tonnes. It's ticking up the whole time as fossil fuels such as coal, oil and gas are burned. Now, the world has long relied on the Amazon to help absorb some of these emissions. But now researchers are warning the rainforest's ability to act as the Earth's lungs could be changing. Well, our science correspondent Thomas Moore is here to explain why. Thomas.
Global warming would be a whole lot worse if it wasn't for the world's plants sucking up carbon dioxide. Since 1960, they've absorbed around a quarter of all fossil fuel emissions, and the Amazon has been a big part of that. It contains an estimated 123 billion tonnes of carbon, but new research shows the Amazon basin is in trouble. In the West, it's absorbing slightly more carbon than is being released from dead, rotting trees and human impact. But in the South and the East, which accounts for more than a quarter of the Amazon area, it's become a net source of carbon. So how's that happened? Well, the Amazon gets more than 2 metres of rain on average every year. Between a quarter and a third of that results from moisture that's released by trees. But the Amazon's climate is changing, particularly in the east. Over the last 40 years, rainfall at times of the year has decreased by up to a third, and temperatures have increased by up to 2.5 degrees. Now, the scientists say there is a clear link with deforestation. In the east, around a quarter of the Amazon has been cleared, mostly for agriculture, more than twice as much as the west. The fires used to clear the forest release huge amounts of carbon, but the absence of trees also dries out the surrounding forest, raising the risk of more fires as well as stunting the growth of the remaining trees and reducing carbon uptake. It could be the beginning of a major tipping point where in just a few decades, much of the forest dies. That would shrink the habitat of unique species and accelerate global warming.
Thomas, thank you. Now, free public transport and a scheme to help households switch to green alternatives could help make the transition to a net zero future fairer for everyone. Now, that's according to the Environmental Justice Commission, which wants people to be put at the heart of the government's climate targets. Their findings were informed by 4 citizens' juries who suggested changes they thought would help them go green.
The biggest barrier is our lifestyle.
It's cost.
I think the biggest thing all around was obviously education. When I joined the panel, I knew very little about it. It was quite a big eye-opener to me.
Those of us who are the jurors on the program could act as climate champions in our neighborhood, in the local areas, so we could then pass the message on to the local communities.
Our demands fuel what is produced. Why do we operate like this? Can we do it differently? We are going against years and years of conditioning.
People have, over the years, developed habits.
Fast fashion, fast foods, fast everything.
There should be more information out there for people to realise what's going on.
There's a need to engage with the local communities a bit more.
Well, Luke Murphy is the head of the Environmental Justice Commission and joins me now. So your report says that people and fairness need to be put at the heart of the drive to hit net zero. So what does that mean and how can it be achieved?
Well, firstly, I mean, we know that action on the climate and nature crises is urgent. The question now is really about how we carry out that transition. And the crucial message of the report today that we launched today is the opportunity to improve people's quality of life. There's a real opportunity to do that through this transition in creating new jobs, improving health and well-being and tackling poverty. But what we heard from people and communities right across the country was that this transition must be rooted in fairness, because unless it is rooted in fairness, it simply won't succeed, because the public support for the transition simply won't be there.
And the government has set out its strategy for zero carbon transport. Does that meet your brief of putting people and fairness first?
I don't think it does. I mean, we obviously welcome some of the measures. It has some ambitious proposals in terms of an earlier phase out of petrol and diesel vehicles and its particular focus on trucks. But I think what we've called for, and actually what we heard from citizens across the country, from Thurrock to the South Wales valleys, was that they want to see much greater investment in affordable, accessible public transport. They want to see greater investment in active transport, in walking and cycling. And that really was missing from the government's strategy today. Lots of targets, lots of lofty ambitions, but I'm not sure there's really enough to deliver the kind of change that actually the people want to see across the country.
And you've listened to people, as you say, up and down the land. Do you think that the public should play a greater role in formulating climate-related policies?
Absolutely. That's something we heard again and again. People want 3 things. They want more information. They think actually there should be a kind of an information campaign similar to COVID that recognises the scale of the threat, of climate change and the scale of the change that we need to undertake. Secondly, they want to be more involved in decisions themselves. They want to see more things like juries that go beyond just the normal consultation. And thirdly, they want to see more powers devolved and given away from Westminster or the devolved governments to their local areas, to their local councils. No plan, we can't have one-size-fits-all plans. That's what we were told. And so we need to see powers distributed across the country to allow local areas to develop their own plans.
Luke Murphy, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this summer, Sky Sports is highlighting the impact of climate change at some of the UK's highest profile sporting events ahead of the COP26 summit in Glasgow in November. And to kick it all off, Sky Sports news presenter David Garrido has hit the road in an electric car, of course.
Right, stop one, Hotspur Way, Tottenham's training ground. We're here with club ambassador Ledley King. You're top of the Sustainability Premier League table. Why should fans care?
Climate change is something that is affecting us all, and it's vital that we all do our part, as we are doing here at the club.
OK, listen, lads, I'd love to chat and stay here for breakfast, but we're on an electric road trip. Let's go! Stop 2 is the Oval. We are talking the first ever prototype bamboo cricket bat. Ben is the co-inventor. Talk to me about this, Ben.
So it captures more carbon dioxide than a willow cricket bat. It's grown next to the factories, so we save on transport emissions, and it's got a better end of life than a willow cricket bat.
Stop 3 is Dorney Lake. I'm here with some GB rowers, the 1992 Olympic champion Greg Searle and Melissa Wilson as well. Melissa, I've been hearing about this as a symbol, as a gesture. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, we're creating a green legacy for Team GB this summer, and part of that is involving athletes too. So we've got them doing this symbol. It's the Olympic rings, it's planet Earth, it's the need to get to carbon zero, and you'll be seeing it on your screens this summer.
Well, that's everything from us for today. Coming up tomorrow, the people forced from their homes by extreme weather events becoming more common and more frequent because of climate change. You can see that here at the same time on Sky News. Thanks for watching. See you then.